for coming out. Thank you for
thank
joining
you.
us.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
How y'all doing today?
Hey guys, how you doing? Y'all excited? We want to thank you for joining us on Elevation Rewind. We want to thank you for taking the time out, but we got some questions for you guys.
We're going to start with throwing a couple of words out there.
Uh-oh.
We're going to just throw some words
Throw
at
it
you.
out.
And if you catch it, you'll let us know.
Yep.
We'll pass you the mic.
That's it.
All right? The first word I want to throw out to you men of God is leadership.
Leadership. Leadership is service. Serving people. Helping people to see their way. Leadership is leading in your area of gifting. That's what leadership is. Most people think about leadership from that perspective, but from a different perspective, from a follower perspective, but that's the way I think about leadership.
And along that lines, a lot of times people think that they have to be in a named position to be considered a leader, but everybody has a sphere of influence. And sometimes we don't necessarily use our sphere of influence for the good things. A lot of times we're leading people down bad paths, but one thing we have to recognize is that everyone has the potential to be leaders, even if they're not in a position or title of leadership.
I'd say leadership has nothing to do with power. It has to do with getting down and dirty and setting an example for people, clearing a path for people and letting them know what they can be done through your own actions, working alongside of them, not dictating and telling them what to do.
Oh, come on, man.
All right, now next. Oh, you have a. Come on.
He
I got one.
All
one.
right.
When I think of leadership, I think first about fellowship. And
come on.
every good leader begins as a good follower.
Oh, that's good.
And so if you learn how to be a good follower, then you'll ultimately be a good leader. And so every leader starts as a good follower first.
And just kind of piggyback what Pierre said, it's service. It's surrendering your will for others. It's setting that example first. And I think, it's not about, where you're putting yourself out there to promote yourself, but it's about recognizing what others are doing around you and also just letting them know how much you appreciate it. I'm in a leadership role at work, and I try to be diligent about that to make sure that I'm recognizing my people. They're the ones that make me look good. And letting them know they're important, they're valued. And when you set that example, they just, they'll flourish for you.
And you know what? Speaking of leadership, I love the leadership of Jehoshaphat in the Bible and how he made people go in, the people that were following him, he made them go into the face of God to get direction. And so I think that's also important with leadership. So the word I want to throw out to you guys is vision. And I want to know how, when I say vision, tell me what you think. And then there's another question that we're going to tag alongside the word vision.
Well, I'm going to say this. There's a quotation that I love that says, vision without action is a daydream. Action without vision is a nightmare. And a lot of times we move around aimless. It's the idea of, if I need to go somewhere that I've never been before, how do I get there? Do I just get up and do I just decide to just drive until I maybe get in that direction? Or do I have some guidance as to where it is I'm supposed to go? And so when you're thinking about vision, the idea is that somewhere, and I believe all of us on this panel believe that God is the one that sets our vision, like kind of gives us the desires of where to go. And the idea is, all right, not only is there a path that I'm supposed to go down, but there's a method by which I got to do it. And I think that's extremely important.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, you have to see the end from the beginning. And I think that's the problem we have, we have to do that faith walk. It's stepping out, right? So, but God gives you clarity for something. And I think the problem where we get tripped up, particularly as men, is we want to see the whole package first, right? So there has to be faith within vision. So you definitely have to see the end first, right, from the beginning.
You said something there, my brother. You said as men, we get tripped up because we want to see the package first. Now, I could take that in a lot of different directions this morning, but I'm going to take it in the direction, this one here. How is it when choosing a wife, you can't see the end package, but you have to see it with your spiritual eyes, right? So how How does a man of God choose a wife?
Come on now.
That's a very good question. So, a man of God has to really understand and see, what a woman of God is through the Word. You have to go through the Word first and understand how does God define a wife, right? But first, you have to be secure in yourself, and I think that's the problem. Is men have the tendency to be insecure, so that's why they act out. That's why you see the anger, whether it be their upbringing, they'll make excuses. So first you have to go to Word. How does God define a man and how he treats his wife? He makes it very clear in his Word. She is a partner. And first of all, you have to love yourself before you can really love someone else, right? So I think that's the way God has defined that.
And just kind of add on to what he said, though, a man has to have his relationship with God all the way together. If we look at the biblical example, if we look at Genesis, we look at God and Adam spent a lot of time together, and God was doing a lot with Adam before Eve even came on the scene. So there was a lot of preparation time before Eve even came on the scene, you understand? And even still, once, the package, as we call her, we're not going to minimize you because women, you are precious gifts to us.
No, we packages, yep.
But just to bring it, you have to be, as he said, secure in yourself, secure in your relationship with God. Understand who you are as the man of God before you even begin to even think about, that relationship. But then once you have that relationship settled and secure with God for yourself, then God will begin to show you the woman of God. He will begin to show you who she is. That's the vision.
There's the vision.
And once you see her, you will know with certainty and without a doubt that that's the woman of God. That's her. That's my queen. That's my prize. Amen.
I got a cool little story about that. Little Shavela, I call her my little chocolate drop. And we're celebrating 10 years
What she
of
call you,
marriage.
Mike? No, I'm joking.
We're not going to tell all the business
We're
on
not
TV
going to
now.
tell all of it.
But she, we were good friends for years, at least 4 years before we actually got to the point where we were going to start getting married. And I actually broke up with her 3 times. 2 times I knew I broke up with her. The 3rd time I didn't, and that's the one where she hated me for it. I didn't even know we were dating, but that's another story. But I remember moving back from Ohio. I lived in Ohio for 13 years. We were out in Ohio doing ministry together and stuff. And I was like, no, I'm not, because the Lord was working on me, right? The Lord was getting me together. And I remember there was a gig that I was supposed to go to in Phoenix. And it was going to pay good, too. It was like at least $6,000, $7,000 in Phoenix. It was going to be good. And I knew the Lord had made it very clear that she was the one. And I decided that I gave that gig to somebody else, and I flew out to Ohio to go get my wife.
Yeah, wasn't she worth the money?
And she was definitely worth it. Oh, my
That's
gosh.
it.
And, to this day, I never got that gig back. He still does it. But I wouldn't trade it in the world because God made it very clear that she was the one. Through the ups and the downs, through everything that we've been through over the last 10 years, the Lord just made it very clear. And here's the other thing, and I'm not trying to hog this up.
No.
But we're not going to be perfect when it comes for us to be with that person.
Right.
Part of our development comes once that person comes in. Remember, Adam was not complete until he had Eve by his side.
Yeah.
And I think that's something. I am a better man today than I was 15 years ago, and a lot of it had to do with Shavela, former Williams Dorsey. You know what I mean? And so I want to make sure that those that are out there looking at former Williams Dorsey. She is Dorsey now.
Make sure y'all know she got my name now.
Yeah, that's right. She got my name.
Okay. Daniel?
All right, so I don't know about everybody else up here, but might be the only one that's not married yet. I'm getting married in a month and a half in Mexico.
All right, yeah. Alicia's out here somewhere.
On a beach in Mexico.
All right. There you go. Where are you going for the bachelor party?
Mexico, bro. So, what I wanted to add to it was, what I found out, and this mostly goes for the young people, is that we're in such a rush to find a perfect partner. We seek outside sources to complete ourselves instead of inside sources and instead of God to complete us, that people run off and get married just to try to satisfy a hole they feel within themselves. And it's not until we have, we got to clear our vision of all that nonsense and all that junk so we see our focus on God clearly, and then we've built the best version of ourselves. And until we build the best version of ourselves, we're not going to attract the best version of ourselves. There's no point looking for a mate when you're still struggling mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, because you're going to attract somebody just as sick as you. And so it wasn't, I'm 41 years old. I don't have any children. I haven't gotten married yet because I wasn't ready. I mean, I was still in the trenches. I was still living the wrong way, and it wasn't until recent years that I've finally gotten on a level where I could attract somebody on my level.
That's good.
That's real good.
That's good. Okay, so let me we talked about, the vision for a wife, but let's talk about the vision for your family and how do you execute it? Because the thing is this, you heard people say that, a vision is not a vision until you execute it. It's just probably a mere thought. And
Dream.
There's a difference between a dream and a vision. Now, how do you execute? Because we believe, and we know that you guys believe, and people in the audience believe, that a man should have a vision for his family.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I'll go ahead and talk on that. The Bible says what? Without a vision, the people what?
The people perish.
Right. So that's what we have to have as men. We have to have the vision, and we get the vision from God. And when God gives you the vision, you share the vision with your other half, and you let them know that this vision is where we're going to go. Now, if I could just back up a little bit, because I really want to touch on this. A man has to have their work in order. And I'm not talking about a job, everyone. I'm talking about your work. Why did God make you as a man? Why were you born? Your work is your gifting. Every single human being, every single man has a gift. And if you focus on your work, which is your gift, when you go to that job, it doesn't matter if you lose that job, right? So that's where I take that whole vision from.
I love that. I love that because while it might matter to your pocketbook, it's your source that's going to tell you, it's okay, Placida. It's okay, John. It's okay, Pierre. I got you. And that's when that's when faith kicks in, right?
Because if I will say this, because things don't always work out.
Right.
I can say as a man, I left my corporate job to start my speaking and coaching business, and I had to lean on my wife. I had to lean on my wife and do odd jobs before my speaking and coaching career could pop off and really blow up.
Right.
So you have to have a strong vision and know that it's from God.
Right.
And not be afraid to do other things in the meantime as well.
That's good.
I think also along the way, and I was challenged by my mentor coach to stop looking at goals as goals, but look at them as expectations. And a goal, we kind of give ourselves permission if we fail, right? It's like a goal. I set this goal. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fail. Expectation, people lose jobs over expectations not being met, right?
Right.
And so one of the things that we have to do as a man is set some expectations. First of all, expectations for ourselves, right? Expectations for those in our family. And then we have to make it a partnership. Our wives have to come beside us. One of the things that Bishop Johnson, when we did our premarital counseling, he reminded us that submission is not just about the woman doing what the man says. In many ways, we got to submit to our wives too. And so what's fascinating, when you have a praying wife and you both are praying, there are times where, matter of fact, I can tell you there's been some things over the last few months that she and I prayed separately about and then came together corporately and prayed, and the Lord gave us the same answer. And I think a lot of times what ends up happening is we're worried to bring the other person in because we kind of get caught up in what we think and everything. But when the Lord's truly in it, what happens is he brings those things together in a way that you couldn't have imagined and setting those expectations. This is where we're expecting to be as a family. And then all of a sudden what happens is you may not necessarily see how it's all going to fill in. She comes along and has it filled in like, oh, my gosh, I never thought about that.
She got the details.
She got the details figured out. Yeah.
So we had this conversation with Team Elevation this morning. Sometimes it's not about trusting the other person. It's about trusting the God in the other person. Yeah. Yes, we know that in relationship we trust our spouse, right? But sometimes in those hard moments, you gonna know in a couple months that I love you, but I don't agree with what you're saying. I love you. I don't see what you're seeing, right? But in a marriage relationship, somebody's got to yield, right? Tell us how you feel about yielding and submission.
Y'all knew it was coming, didn't y'all?
Yeah,
So, submission, yielding in a relationship is all about, first of all, making sure that your ego is in check. That's one of the first things you have to check at the door when you're in a relationship of any sort. But most importantly, in a relationship, in a marriage relationship, you have to check your ego. Because if you allow your ego to run wild in your marriage, it will destroy your marriage. So, in submitting, that goes both ways, because we have in America, which is one of those countries that everything is pretty male dominated. Says the mindset and everything. So we have to, as men of God, we have to understand and know that there's a time and a place. There are plenty times that we all have done it, guys. And let's be honest, before the Waze app and before we had all these GPSs and everything. There have been times we've been driving places and on our way somewhere.
I'm going the right way. I got your
Absolutely,
back. I'm going the right way. I know where I'm going.
I got this, girl. Like, fall back, I got this. You know what I mean? And she'd be like, honey, you supposed to make that left turn. You'd be like, no, listen. It's a reason there's no steering wheel on your side. I got this. And be dead wrong. Check your ego, because sometimes you have to understand that when you marry this person, the two become one. That's your partner. She's not at war with you. You're not at war with her. You are a team. And so when you understand that, it's easier for you to submit to her. It's easy. It's not a problem for me to submit to my wife. It was when I was younger, when I was full of bravado, when all of that, before I began to mature in my spiritual life. It was tougher for me because I felt like I had to be this brash, I'm the man of the house, you know what I mean? But I understand that there are two different types of masculinity.
Right.
There's spiritual masculinity, the real type, the one that we really should be operating in. And then there's the world idea of masculinity, which is going to destroy your relationship.
Right. I got another part for that submission, but go ahead, Mike.
There is a little dog by the name of Reggie who lives with my parents and has been living there for the last 3 years. Because I wanted a dog and she really didn't, but she was willing to compromise and get this dog. And there came a point where talking to the Lord showed me, you about to lose your wife over this little dog. And it's about to be either your wife or the dog. And so we dropped him off at my parents' house on our way to Ohio for Thanksgiving and never picked him back up. And that's just it. And you're talking about that, but that's the whole thing, because here I told you I like dogs. I never grew up without a dog. And she was like, I don't like dogs, but I'm going to try it, because she was trying to make it work. And all of a sudden, that ego thing got in the way, and all you realize, really, no, you're more important than this dog is. And things like that happen all the time, by the way.
And as you guys were talking about, submission, I believe that, we say that the church is filled with 80% women, right? The church is filled with 80% women. And a lot of times I hear this, that a lot of times that men won't come to church because they don't want to submit to another man or another person of authority. Can you guys explain to us, have you ever been in that place and why? And because we want to keep, we want to keep the women encouraged. We want to keep people encouraged like he's coming, but it's something that goes on inside of a man that makes him not want to submit to the authority or the leadership. Let's say a leadership, because the leadership piece is important. Mm-hmm. And why is that?
I'm going to tell you, it's insecurity. Mm-hmm. Like he was talking about ego. And since I'm getting married in Mexico next month, I'm telling you, your ego is not your amigo, right? I preach against ego all the time. Ego is the downfall of almost everything, especially men. And we've been societally conditioned to walk around with our ego up front. But just like in a relationship, you have to, in order to submit to your partner, you have to respect your partner. Now, why am I going to get married to someone I don't respect in the first place? Mm-hmm. It's already a toxic relationship. Right. Mm-hmm. The same thing with walking into a church and seeing another man of God. Men, some women, but most men will pick them apart and try to find flaws with that preacher. Oh, they pass around the collection plate too much. Yeah. That's insecurity. Yeah. Because they feel insecure in that man's presence. Yeah. But when you respect that man as a man of God, then you can go and listen and be humble in front of them.
I have two things to say. I'm gonna let you continue, but I also want to add right specifically to that point. It's not always, we're going to get to this with the women's panel,
Oh, yeah.
but some of us women will give that pastor more respect and more honor than we'll give our husbands. And ain't no man going to want to sit up under a pastor that has more respect and authority than himself,
That's
than
true.
he's getting. So there's a part B to that question. It's
So
coming
you talk,
soon.
you
coming
talk
to-
about the private life
Yes.
versus the public life.
That's right.
It's not matching.
It's not
Yeah,
matching.
yeah.
It's not matching. And also, I want to let you know, again, I said this show is for all of us. I just got something from you. I got a dog named Bentley that might need to get dropped off somewhere so I can stay married. Bless Jesus. Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead, Rob. You had something to say?
No, just kind of adding on, going back to the we were talking about submission, and we talked about ego and everything. And I think the other issue that men have with is they like to stay in isolation too. I think they don't like to be told, right? Maybe it could have been the upbringing of an absent father, whatever it may be. But they tend to isolate themselves and to go in an environment that, and kind of what Danny was talking about, is being judgmental. They're coming in and they're right, they got their guard up, right? So they're ready to like find the flaws to try to make themselves feel better. And that's a huge problem for men. And so kind of like, I don't want to take it off track, but the approach of the ministry that I'm involved in is we try to meet men where they are. So we have Bible studies out of my house where guys can be really authentic and real, where they may not be behind the four walls of an institutional church. And it kind of lets them drop that barrier down, just so that they can get to that point. Hopefully they can go in places like that and feel more comfortable about themselves.
Right.
So.
And I remember years ago when I first came to church, my husband wasn't with me, for those that know that. But I remember getting frustrated, being a very frustrated wife, because I see all the other men in church and you see them doing their thing. And I was just having a conversation with the team this morning how I began to compare, my husband. But then God told me, you need to speak what he already is. I had to call him king, because there may have been some things that was going on. I had to call him king, say, you're my king. You're the head of this house. And what happened? The words caused transformation.
Come on. Come on. So the thing about vision, right? We have it and we see it before it manifests.
Right.
So he was your king.
Right.
Before you saw him acting like a king.
Right.
Amen?
Right.
So this was here before it manifested.
Right.
And so when do you call your children into what God has called them to be? You see it.
Yeah, you see it.
100%.
Come on now, talk to me.
100%.
I call my children into what God calls them to be before they're even born.
That's right. Come on.
God says we have the power of is the life and death is in the power of your tongue. So you're supposed to speak into the life of the child.
That's it.
So when my child was in my wife's stomach, I was speaking into my life, the life of my child.
That's it.
I say, you are going to be a king. You are going to be a leader. Why? Because the power is in our words.
Right.
Our words are extremely powerful. And I think that one of the things that I would just want to touch on that church thing, because church is this.
This is church. Come on.
And a lot of guys, for us guys, we don't know that church is this. Church is just when two or more people gather to come together. That's it. So if you go into a building, yes, you go into a building, big deal. But when you talk about God, that's church. So once I found that out, I realized, okay, well, I can talk to this brother right here, and we can start talking, and we have church. And a lot of guys don't understand that. And that's one of the things that I didn't understand. So I'm just sharing with you
That's good.
just to answer that one.
That's good.
I just wanted to add on to the part about the children, because it is important to read the word to them, speak to them in the womb. But then there's a part of them, once they're born into the earth realm, you have to begin to really pay close attention to your children to begin to see what that bent is that God put in them. Because God has placed something in every one of us. And it is the parents' responsibility, and especially, well, I won't say especially.
Not the school system.
Exactly.
Had to say that.
Yes,
That's
sir. No,
It is.
100%.
It's the parents.
Absolutely.
You're supposed to see it.
Absolutely. And you're supposed to see that bent that God put in those children, and you're supposed to begin to nurture that, speak to that, cultivate that, point them toward that, begin to speak that into their lives, and begin to do everything that you can as a parent.
And even if it was never done to you,
Come on.
you can change the
Absolutely.
trajectory of the child's
Absolutely.
life in your family.
Amen. That's it.
Because when you know better, you do better.
You do better.
That's right.
Amen.
We have principals and teachers in our studio audience right now that pray that some parents were partnering with them to start the work at home. And we, the church, can be lazy. We're the church. The people are the church.
We are the church.
I'm the church.
Right.
I have been lazy, thinking it was somebody else's job.
And so my shirt that I chose to wear today, I made, it says, been woke, still dreaming. So been woke for me just means waking up to the truth. A lot of people have their own version of what being woke means, and sometimes it's crazy conspiracy theories and things that just vibe with their own agenda. But the truth generally doesn't vibe with their own agenda. The truth is the truth, and it's usually harsh.
That's good.
So being woke for me was leaving the old lifestyle. You know, being woke for me was when I was selling crack out of Section 8 housing or shooting heroin in the alleys of West Baltimore, I didn't think that I would ever live the life that I'm leading today. I
That's
would be
right.
up here at a
Come
table
on.
like this. I would be traveling to Costa Rica in 2 days, leading a mission team to do mission work and all the other things that I do in my life. So what I hope to leave behind is a path to purpose for people
That's
and be
it.
a role model and
Come
an
on.
inspiration
Good
to
stuff.
people. And just showing them what's possible.
Yeah. So we want to thank Mike, Daniel, Pierre, John, and Rod.
Absolutely.
for
Thank you. Can
joining
you
us.
help us thank these men
Thank you.
for joining us and for sharing?
Thank you, Jesus. What a moment. You have brought us to such a freedom. I have found in you, you're a healer who makes all things new. Yeah, yeah, yeah.